Imagine waking up one day and finding yourself in a world that seems both eerily familiar and terrifyingly alien. This is what it would be like if you were somehow transported 1,000 years back in time to the Middle Ages. The first thing you'd notice is the silence. The world around you is almost empty. There are no cars, no planes, no bustling cities. The land stretches out, vast and mostly uninhabited. You might think you've landed in some remote part of the world, but this is Europe, or what will one day become the Europe you know. You stand in a small village, surrounded by wooden huts and mud brick homes. The air is clean, the sky clear, but the landscape is dotted with fields and forests, with only a few narrow paths connecting scattered settlements. The people around you are dressed in simple, rough clothing, and they move with a purpose. They are farmers, laborers, and craftsmen, all focused on the daily struggle to survive. But as you look closer, you realize that this world, while primitive, is not without its wonders. The people here are deeply connected to the land and to each other. They greet you with curiosity and a hint of suspicion, but also with a warmth that is rare in the modern world. They have a different way of seeing things, a different way of understanding the world. Religion is not just a part of their lives. It is the foundation of their entire existence. The stories of creation, the will of God, and the promise of an afterlife are as real to them as the air they breathe. As you explore this new world, you come across a bustling market in a nearby town. The streets are narrow and crowded, the air thick with the smell of fresh bread, spices, and the occasional whiff of something not so pleasant. Merchants yell out their wares, and people haggle over prices, just like in any market today. But there's something different here. The coins they use are made of silver and gold, and the goods on sale are often exotic, brought from far-off lands by brave traders. In the center of the town, a grand cathedral rises, its spires piercing the sky. Inside, the air is cool and dim, filled with the scent of incense and the soft glow of candlelight. The walls are adorned with intricate paintings and statues, telling the stories of saints and martyrs. This is a place of awe and reverence, a reminder that the divine is ever present in their lives. But life in the Middle Ages is not all beauty and wonder. It is also harsh and unforgiving. Disease and famine are constant threats, and the average person lives a life of hard labor and uncertainty. The concept of fortune, represented by the goddess Fortuna, is a powerful one. People believe that their fates are constantly shifting, that one day they might be on top of the world, and the next they could be reduced to nothing. This idea is captured in an illustration from a 10th century Spanish manuscript, showing Fortuna spinning her wheel, changing the fortunes of 4 kings. Some are rising, others falling, but all are at the mercy of this capricious goddess. The social hierarchy is rigid, with a clear divide between the wealthy landowners and the poor peasants. The landowners, who often hold political power, live in grand manors, enjoying the fruits of their land and the labor of others. The peasants, on the other hand, toil in the fields, struggling to eke out a living. But even among the poor, there is a spectrum of life. Some are skilled craftsmen, respected for their abilities, while others are simple laborers, working from dawn to dusk. Despite the challenges, life in the Middle Ages is not without its moments of joy. People gather in the evenings to tell stories, sing songs, and enjoy simple pleasures. They have a deep sense of community and a strong connection to the land. They celebrate festivals and holidays, marking the passing of the seasons with feasts and rituals. As you navigate this new world, you begin to see that the Middle Ages are not just a distant, forgotten era. They are a time of complexity, of struggle and triumph, of fear and hope. This is a world that shaped the one we live in today, a world that continues to influence our beliefs, our values, and our understanding of what it means to be human. And in the midst of all this, you find yourself wondering, how will you survive in this world? How will you thrive? The journey has only just begun. In the medieval world, the human body was seen very differently from how we understand it today. Our modern idea is that our bodies are like a closed system, with our skin forming a clear boundary between the inside and outside. But in medieval times, people believed the body was more like an open system, with its organs and systems interacting constantly with the world around it. To understand medieval bodies, you need to know about the 4 elements: fire, water, air, and earth. These elements were thought to make up everything in nature, and each had specific properties. Fire was hot and dry, water was wet and cold, earth was dry and cold, and air was hot and wet. These elements didn't just affect the world outside. They were believed to have a direct impact on the body's internal balance. Inside the body, there were 4 humours or fluids that corresponded to these elements: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The balance of these humours determined a person's health and personality. If the humours were out of balance, a person could become ill. For example, too much blood might make someone overly energetic or even violent, while too much phlegm could make them sluggish and apathetic. Medieval doctors or physicians believed that keeping the humours in balance was key to good health. They used various methods to restore balance, such as purging, removing excess humours through vomiting or bowel movements, bloodletting, cutting the skin to let out bad blood, and using herbs and other natural remedies. These treatments were based on the idea that the body needed to be in harmony with its environment. The connection between the body and the environment was taken very seriously. The seasons were thought to affect the body's humours, with spring being associated with air, summer with fire, autumn with earth, and winter with water. As people aged, their bodies were believed to cool down and change, with different stages of life corresponding to different elements. Even the movements of the stars and planets were thought to influence the body's balance, with each celestial body having its own effect. This way of thinking about the body was deeply rooted in ancient texts from Greek and Roman times, which were passed down and studied by medieval scholars. These texts were so respected that they often took precedence over practical observation. This is why some medieval treatments, like using cow dung or boar's bile, might seem strange to us today. The goal was to follow the wisdom of the past, not to innovate. When people in the Middle Ages fell ill, they had several options for treatment. The most elite and educated healers were called physicians, and they were usually university trained. These physicians were well versed in the theories of the 4 humours and the elements, and they often had access to rare and expensive treatments. However, they were expensive, and not everyone could afford them. Most people turned to more practical healers, known as empirics, who included surgeons, midwives, apothecaries, and barbers. These healers learned their skills through hands-on training and apprenticeships, and they were more affordable and accessible to the general population. For example, a surgeon might travel from town to town, carrying a set of surgical tools and offering his services to those in need. Surgeons were skilled in techniques like setting broken bones, performing minor surgeries, and treating wounds. Midwives, on the other hand, specialized in helping women during childbirth, using their knowledge of the body and its needs to ensure the health of both mother and baby. In larger cities, there were often guilds that organized and regulated these healers. Guilds provided support to their members, protected their professional secrets, and sometimes even offered care to those in need. These guilds could be powerful social institutions, influencing local government and playing important roles in community life. The patients who sought treatment from these healers came from all walks of life. The wealthy, like King Edward II of England, could afford a team of physicians and surgeons to care for their household. They had access to the best treatments and the most skilled healers. In contrast, the average person might visit a local apothecary or midwife, who could provide more basic care. Understanding the medieval body and the various healers who treated it helps us see how different the world was back then. The body was seen as deeply connected to nature, and health was a matter of maintaining balance in a complex system. While some of their methods might seem strange to us today, the medieval approach to medicine was a reflection of the world as they understood it. In the Middle Ages, the human body was seen in a very different light compared to today. People believed that the shape and structure of the body were not just about physical health, but also about moral and spiritual well-being. One of the key figures in medieval medicine, Mondino, highlighted 2 important aspects of the human body: its upright posture and its perfect form, both of which were seen as signs of humanity's superiority. Mondino argued that the most significant feature of the human body was its vertical stance. Standing tall on 2 legs, humans could look down on the rest of the animal kingdom. This idea was taken further by other medical writers, who ranked different parts of the body from the lowest and basest to the highest and most noble. The lowest part was the 4th zone, which included the genitals and anus areas considered unclean and taboo. The 3rd zone was the stomach, important but often noisy and uncontrollable. The second zone was the chest, home to vital organs like the heart. But the most important part was the head, with its brain and sensory organs, which made humans the rulers of the medieval world. This upward hierarchy of the body was crucial in understanding why some creatures, like the blemi, were seen as monstrous. The blemi were a fictional tribe believed to have faces on their chests instead of their heads. This unusual placement marked them as less than human, physically inferior, and morally corrupt. In the medieval world, you having no head meant having no true identity or soul, which was a serious issue. Mondino's idea of the perfect form of the human body was closely tied to religious beliefs. According to the Bible, God created Adam in his own image, making the human body a reflection of divine perfection. This perfect form was not just physical, but also moral and spiritual. Any deviation from this form, like the blemi's faceless heads, was seen as both anatomically incorrect and ethically questionable. Medieval authors often described these imagined tribes as violent and uncivilized, their physical differences a sign of their sinful nature. The brain, in particular, was considered one of the most important organs. It was believed to be the center of intellect and movement, even though the complex systems of the nervous, digestive, and circulatory systems were not yet understood. In the Middle Ages, the brain was seen as the seat of the soul, where thought and memory were processed. Philosophers like Plato, and later thinkers like Galen and Avicenna, believed that the brain was responsible for rational thinking and decision-making. An illustration from a 13th century encyclopedia shows a simplified diagram of the brain inside a man's head. The brain was divided into several parts, each with a specific function. The first part, the common sense, gathered sensory information from the eyes and other senses. The second part, the imagination, turned this information into thoughts. These thoughts were then further refined and stored in the memory, which was believed to be the softest and most impressionable part of the brain. Medieval doctors used this model to understand and treat mental illnesses. They believed that intellectual difficulties could be linked to the speed at which thoughts moved through the brain. For example, brilliant minds were thought to have thoughts that moved smoothly and quickly, while children, idiots, and women were believed to have slower, thicker thoughts. When it came to more serious mental illnesses, doctors recommended various treatments. For patients with excessive mental activity, such as insomnia or mania, they suggested calming remedies like soporific plants, massage, and soothing environments with running water and soft music. For patients with underactive brains, they used stimulants and shock treatments, including loud noises, plucking chest hairs, and even placing a sow and piglets in front of the patient to squeal. One of the most famous cases of mental illness in the Middle Ages was King Charles VI of France. In 1392, Charles suffered a violent episode while riding through a forest. He attacked his companions, killing 5 of them before falling into a coma. Over the next decade, his condition worsened, and he experienced periods of extreme behavior, including forgetting family members, destroying furniture, and believing he was made of glass. His illness caused political turmoil in France, and many professionals, including physicians and clerics, tried to help him. They prescribed rest, medicines, and even sent wax effigies of the king to shrines for miraculous cures. In medieval literature, mental illness was often linked to love and heartbreak. One famous example is the Persian tale of Layla and Majnun. Majnun, a young man, falls deeply in love with Layla, but they are separated by their families. Majnun's love drives him to madness, and he wanders into the desert, where he writes poetry in the sand. In one illustration, Layla and Majnun faint when they finally meet, their bodies withered and weak from the pain of unfulfilled love. This story shows how love could transform into a physical and mental illness, causing physical wasting and despair. Medieval people had a complex and often imaginative understanding of the brain and mental health. While their treatments and beliefs may seem strange to us today, they reflect a sophisticated internal logic that tried to explain the mysteries of the mind. Even with the limited knowledge of the time, they recognized the importance of the brain in governing thought, emotion, and behavior. In the Middle Ages, people believed that the state of your hair and head could reveal a lot about who you were. They thought that a person's mental state could be seen in their body, from from their facial expressions to the quality of their skin. One of the most telling features was hair. Doctors and writers of the time believed that hair could show whether someone was smart, noble, or had negative traits. For example, Majnun, a character in medieval stories, had wild, unkempt hair, which people saw as a sign of his madness. Red hair was thought to mean someone had a quick temper, thick or knotted hair suggested brutishness, and thin, pale hair could mean someone was deceitful. Geoffrey Chaucer, a famous writer from the 1300s, used this idea in his stories. In the Canterbury Tales, he describes a character called the Pardoner, who has smooth yellow hair that hangs in thin strands. This description hints that the Pardoner is not a trustworthy person. Later in the story, we find out that the Pardoner is indeed dishonest and willing to cheat people. Medieval doctors believed that hair grew from the head because of the body's internal heat. They thought that hair was formed when warm vapors from the body cooled and solidified, creating individual strands. This is why they believed that hair grew more on the head, where it was warmer, and less on the palms or soles of the feet, where the skin was thicker. They also thought men were hairier than women because men were believed to have hotter bodies, which could also make them more prone to baldness. For women, having no hair on their heads was seen as very unnatural. Medieval standards of beauty often emphasized white skin, red lips, a thin waist, and small breasts. Sometimes a large, long forehead was considered beautiful, and women would pluck their eyebrows and hairline to make their foreheads look bigger. However, moralists disapproved of this vanity. The Trotula, a medieval book on women's health, offered recipes for improving hair, like washing it with cloves to make it smell good or using salt water to make it thicker. People believed that changing your hair could change how others perceived your character, affecting whether they saw you as chaste, beautiful, or mad. The head was also very important in medieval society because it was seen as the center of rationality and personhood. This is why beheadings were so symbolic. They were not as common as some stories suggest, but when they did happen, they were used to send a powerful message. John of Salisbury, a medieval writer, described society using the metaphor of a body, where the king was the head, and different groups of people were different parts of the body. If someone challenged the king's authority, like Llewellyn ap Gruffydd, the Prince of Wales, who rebelled against King Edward I, they could be beheaded. Llewellyn's head was sent to London, crowned with ivy, and displayed on a spike, warning others not to defy the king. Sometimes rulers would show mercy to demonstrate their power. For example, Walter Egg, a man sentenced to hang for theft, survived the execution and sought sanctuary in a cathedral. When King Edward visited the city, he pardoned Egg, showing that he could both take and give life. Saints were also important figures who could endure extreme punishments, including beheadings. Their stories, called Vitae, described their lives and miraculous deeds, especially their deaths. Saints were often depicted in art with the tools of their martyrdom, like Saint Apollonia holding pincers, Saint Stephen with a rock, and Saint Lucy without eyeballs. These images helped people remember and venerate the saints, who were seen as powerful intermediaries between humans and God. In medieval society, the head and hair were more than just physical features. They were symbols of identity, power, and faith. Whether through the meticulous care of hair, the symbolic act of beheading, or the veneration of saints, the head was a central part of how people understood themselves and their place in the world.